You start with my sense that Me Too, and you know Me Too, the sort of calling out scummy men for terrible behavior, that Me Too has perhaps jumped the shark. And while I don't think we should ever stop calling men out for terrible behavior, are we in a society right now where you can never go on a date with, say, a former college professor of yours, or a former boss of yours, or even like a current supervisor of yours? 651-461-9226. I'm concerned for women who truly are being victimized by scummy men, that their messages are going to be ignored if we continue amplifying messages like the one that sort of blew up last night in Illinois. A woman telling her story about a guy who's running for the U.S. House in Illinois. Daniel Biss is a Democratic congressional frontrunner. And Daniel Biss was a math, like TA, like a 26-year-old professor in 2004. And last night, a spokesperson, acknowledged an ill-advised relationship with a former student. And I don't know that it was that ill-advised, to be honest. Certainly, I don't think it was so ill-advised that 22 years later, you need to come confess the fact that your former professor, this guy waited till he was done teaching, and then he asked the girl out on a date, and they kissed. And they had a couple dates. And now 22 years later, she's like, oh, this was awful. Give me a break. I worry that we have turned normal behavior into tut-tut, that's inappropriate. You can't do that. And it makes me nervous to even talk about it because we've turned this topic into such a third rail that nobody can ask anybody out. You got to weigh the power dynamic at hand. How many of you, maybe that's what you guys should call in with at 651-461-9226. How many of you have ever gone on a date with a former teacher or someone who supervised you? Now, I have told friends who are CEOs that you cannot date anyone at work, right? Like if you're the CEO, there is a power dynamic at play that you sort of have to just say like, look, I'm going to find love elsewhere. Here's what happened with this couple, not really a couple, but here's what she writes. It took becoming a professor myself to realize the implications, what it means to be attracted to someone who has categorically less power than you. This guy was 26. The former student was 20. They went on a handful of dates over the course of a couple weeks. He ended it because he was like, I don't know that I should be getting serious with a former teacher or a former student, which I would say was overly cautious on his part. She writes, after a few very intense evenings, he had second thoughts. It was wrong to date a student, of course, so we would have to stop making out. Of course, we could still hang out, and so we continued to spend time together in what to any external observer would look like dates until that stopped, too. Is this is this what the Me Too group intended? Think back to some of the disgusting behavior that, like, Matt Lauer was accused of, that Charlie Rose was accused of, that truly abusive men who were taking advantage of their power. So different from this. This is like to me, this is some of the normal part of life. Texter says, bunch of prudes. I think the intent here is good, to be sensitive of whether people are really consensually engaging in relationships, right? That's all. But do we want to live in a world where you could never date anybody at work? There's always going to be a power imbalance. Somebody always is maybe a little more of a star, has a little more of a future. Do you think, and I would categorize a teacher-student relationship, Dan, former student, and now I think it's different if you're talking high school, perhaps.
It's much different if you're talking high school.
Yeah, it's different. Unless you wait 10 years or something, and even then people are going to raise eyebrows at it. But I do think, like, high school is different. When you're looking at 20 and a TA who's 26, I don't know, man. Like, do we want to outlaw that as a society? Is that now, to a certain degree, he must have felt a little. Now, he is a professor at the University of Chicago. So, like, of course he felt like. But should he have? I don't know. I think isn't this a tale as old as time? You wait till the end of the semester. How many people are married because they met?
Well, yeah, but
you're so close in age.
Just because it's happened doesn't mean it should be happening.
Is it something that should or shouldn't happen?
If I was in a position of authority over somebody at any point, I wouldn't try to date that person.
Ever.
Nope.
Yeah.
And, that's easy for me to say, obviously, because I've never been in that scenario. But I can just see that look, there's a lot of people out there in the world. You don't need to poke this particular bear.
Which is fair, but, like, how many people end up dating somebody that they know from work or dating someone from school? And it's because you're looking for connection. You have something in common. I know. And there was no, I get it. Your answer is for sure the safest way to go to make sure no one ever accuses you of anything. Right? Like,
I mean, that's one way to describe it. I would call it, in my mind, it's the wise way to go.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a problem with that. Would I do it? I don't know, right? Like you're saying, I've never been in that scenario. Yeah. But he had no power over her at the time they went on the date.
Dated. Right.
And isn't that the idea? Like, make people...
It is, but if your relationship was essentially established as one where there was authority, how does that all manifest? I think you just set yourself up for so many issues going forward when you do that it just makes way more sense to say, no, sorry, that's a line, that's a boundary, I'm just not going to go there.
22 years ago is when this happened. I think the fact that they kissed, does that change it? That it was just they were on a couple dates. He ended it. To me, it sounds like this is, if you're a believer, that you never should kind of dip your nib in the company ink, essentially, then this worked out about as well as you could expect 22 years ago, that the guy felt like, maybe this is not the best idea, and he ended it. And now 22 years later to come out and write this long confessional on the eve of a primary election where this guy is the front runner, like, bleh.
I absolutely don't believe this particular situation is disqualifying for somebody to hold office. Especially, like you said, I think the fact that he realized the problematic nature of it and ended it. It was an unwise decision to ask her out in the first place, but that doesn't, one unwise decision 20 some odd years ago, I'm sorry, that doesn't disqualify him for office. I just I don't
And
find that
you
odd.
have the right to tell your story, right? Everyone
Sure,
has the right
absolutely.
to tell their story.
100%.
But I also have the right to say, like, give me a break. This was the moment that you bring this out? Benjamin on YouTube says, I don't understand what the story is. They were about the same age. What's wrong? It is this idea that I don't know that I fully agree with. It is this idea that if there is any power imbalance, which to me, if you're an assistant, if you're 26 and you're like a TA or an assistant professor, like I in the reporting is sort of unclear. Like at 26, you're not a tenure. You got to be pretty close to a nobody at the University of Chicago, right? You're probably some level of a graduate assistant, but you're teaching the class. And the theory is if you have power, that even if someone consents, they can't fully consent because there's a power dynamic. Some of the reaction to this: left eats their own candidate with idiotic Me Too scandal. That is the right-wing Daily Caller reaction, which, it's hard for me to disagree.
It'll get him clicks for sure.
It's hard for me to disagree with that assessment.